do you think? I think we might have talked about it outside of the podcast, but if the Hawks end up with the first overall pick, and like
No,
everybody's saying consensus is Matthew Schaefer, and Schaefer's gotten comparables of like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. It's like, would you rather take Schaefer and then trade somebody that we have, or just skip Schaefer and take somebody who might not be as good?
I think if the Hawks get number one, you discuss who's at 2, 3, and 4. See if any of those teams need a defenseman.
Yeah.
You pick swap and get a little bit extra in it.
Yeah, like you entertain the idea of moving the pick in order to possibly get like a prospect plus like 2, 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think that, and it's not me saying like, oh, I don't want that kid or anything like that. I think after taking Levshunov last year,
yeah,
and it's like people's criticism was, oh, Demidov should have been the pick, and it's like it's a valid point that the Hawks needed a bona fide winger forward to go with Bedard. It's a valid thing. I just think it's overreacting, saying like, oh, Levshunov's a bust because it wasn't Demidov kind of thing. I think if they're picking one, unless there's no reason to not take him, yeah, you take him. But I think it's more important to grab a forward just because how deep of our pool is at defense.
Yeah. I'm just, if the kid is possibly supposed to be as good as like a Cale Makar or a Quinn Hughes, like they're so fucking good.
Right.
Like, because then at that point, your top pairing is probably Schaefer and Rinzel, or Schaefer and Levshunov, and then your second pairing's Vlasic and Rinzel or Levshunov. Like, that's just so disgusting. And you can just trade one of your defensive prospects for a winger that you really need.
Well, here's another, and I don't even know if this is like a legitimate, if it's just me playing NHL 25 and just trying to figure out, ways to move it. You take Schaefer number 1.
Yeah.
You look at 2, 3, and 4, 5, maybe even 5, because I think after that there's 4 forwards that have been like tossed in there as like could be the top pick.
Okay.
3 or 4, whatever.
It's Porter Martone, Michael Misa, and James Hagens.
So 3, yeah. No, 4?
With Schaefer is 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's 3. So you talk to the top 3, and then do you entertain the idea of maybe moving Levshunov to get 2, 3, or 4?
I think he would be entertaining the idea of moving Korchinski, because Schaefer is a left-handed defenseman, Vlasic's left-handed defenseman, Korchinski's left-handed, and then on the right's Rinzel, on the right's Levshunov. So, like, don't be so loaded up on the left side, unless you have Korchinski just move to the right.
But so it depends. Copy paste prospect A, prospect B. Would you entertain trying to see if you can move them to get into the top 5 and have 2 picks top 5? Or do you think that's going to cost too much?
I'm sure you would entertain it.
Especially after the rumors of him trying to get 4 last year on top
of with an unprotected first for the next season.
Because you got 2 first-round picks this year.
Yep.
Still, you got Toronto's, and then I think next year it goes back to just
1 as of right now.
1.
I mean, if we don't get any first rounders or anything from this draft, or not this draft, this trade deadline,
which doesn't look like it's going to be. I mean,
if we could honestly like do the first this year and an unprotected first next year, I think that would be a great move.
The Toronto first this year, or
the Toronto first this year and then an unprotected first next year, because it's like such a good gamble. If you can get 2 guys in the top 5 this year, but that's like such an NHL 25 kind of fucking thing.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I said I'm like,
but they tried it, right? They tried it last year.
Yeah,
Like
and
how
it's
close
like I don't know
it
if it's
wasn't.
like a legitimate like idea or whatever,
Yeah,
or I'm like, or if I'm just playing too much 25, like trying to.
but like okay, so like how could it work? Because it's if you do like Toronto this year, unprotected in first next year, and then like maybe somebody like a B level prospect. I don't know. So much. So much. Anyway, we were talking about Edmonton.
Yeah, this is also like no.
Yeah.
Now that we're talking about it, this is why I'm really hoping that the Hawks kind of like are drafting fourth,
I would prefer
third,
third.
third or fourth. But I mean, like, and like I don't want
Second
them
or
drafting
third,
top
really.
two.
I think
Honestly,
two or three would be great. Because then I don't have to feel so bad that we like, oh, like we lost out on first. Like we didn't get that guy. Like that sucks. But like if we have first, it's like, okay, if the best player in this entire draft is a defenseman, that's very frustrating because like if he's gonna be so good, like you gotta fucking take him.
but you could have a good haul though from trading that first pick, and it could stay in the top
Potentially.
5.
Yeah. Potentially. You
Like,
could like I feel like a team if it's like San Jose, right? If they're like sitting 3 and you go like, hey, like we'll swap picks and then you give us
Celebrini, call it even.
yeah, Celebrini. I was thinking like one of their other like later first rounders that they had drafted like recently, like see if they would move one of those like forwards and be like, yeah, do that swap. But I don't know.
Besides Schaefer, do you have someone you're leaning towards that is like if we had to make a draft selection like tomorrow?
I think
Do you have a
Hagen's. I like Hagen's, but how many like smaller like the size thing is like it's such a dumb thing to worry about. Like when you're talking about one guy, right? You
Yeah.
shouldn't really worry about the size. But when you start talking about like how your team is built, you don't really want to have a bunch of smaller guys, and we already have a couple, and that's why if it's not Hagen's, I'm thinking I'd rather have Martone.
That's kind of who I'm leaning towards too, and because he's naturally a winger, he's not
Yeah,
a center.
yeah, and he's a power forward too. Like he's not afraid to fucking throw his body around. Like
6'2", 208 pounds.
6'2". I thought he was 6'4".
According to so they just did like their mid-season ranking.
Mm.
And he's listed as 6'2".
That's still like that's decent. That's like league average, maybe, or league average.
He'll be like 6. He's like 6'4" then on skates, give or take.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, that's what I'm leaning to. The other one that I think, but yeah, it's like it's so many centers. Like
Yeah, I mean,
10,
at that point, if you get somebody
top
that
10
can
is
win
all
faceoffs,
D and center except for Martone. He's the only
yes.
winger that's like in the top 10 for the North American skaters.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because there's this Victor Eklund kid, but he's like sitting at 7 in like 5, 6, 7 in some rankings. But yeah, Porter Martone. That's what I.
Yeah,
That's what
so I mean that's the name if you're looking for players to kind of keep an eye on the rest of the
he's
year.
listed at 6'3" on Elite Prospects.
Okay, so it's 3 different heights.
Yep. He's somewhere over 6 foot.